What's up, everyone? My name is Mistic. Welcome to Mistic Rex. Today with a video by Trust Me Bro. Good things done by horrible people, as you can see right on the screen so far. Just because someone does something good, it doesn't mean they're a good person. And it doesn't make them any less horrible, as usually there is an ulterior motive or just saving appearance. So, or just for themselves and their own interest. But let's get into it and see what they've done. Check
Good
the video
things
down below.
done by bad people.
Right.
When you mention an absolutely evil person, the first thing you're going to discuss is the bad things they've done.
Or if you're, in politics, they seem to like mentioning all the good things about horrible people. Especially Hitler for some reason. Who knows why? They surely don't have the same opinions as him.
But in this video, I wanted to explore the juxtaposition between bad people and good deeds. Obviously not to sympathize with or rationalize with these horrible people that I'm going to be mentioning, but just to shed some light on some interesting historical facts in a rather morbid way, and to kind of open your mind about how complex people and situations really are. Let's explore some of the good deeds.
Complex, maybe just, hidden motives.
Done by some of the worst people.
Right.
Adolf Hitler. I feel like Adolf Hitler was a natural starting point for this video. And honestly, his atrocities and crimes against humanity don't really need a explanation. Right. But I do feel it's important to reiterate exactly how evil this man was. However, did you know that there's a very likely chance the car that you may drive on a daily basis exists because of Hitler? Let me explain. During the 1930s, Hitler wanted a lot of things. One of those things was affordable vehicles for every German family. He wanted a car that could haul a family, some luggage, and also be affordable and reliable. He wanted a car for the people, a people's car, and you probably already see where this is going. If you don't, people's car in German translates to Volkswagen, and in 1937, Volkswagen was established in Wolfsburg, Germany. Just for a bit of context, cars were an extreme luxury at this point in time, and roughly only 1 of every 50 Germans actually had a vehicle. Most people either had a bicycle at best or their feet at worst. So this plan for widespread affordable vehicles was rather ambitious. We still had walkable for that reason, cities. Took a lot of initiative and effort. And one man who put a lot of effort into this Volkswagen project was Ferdinand Porsche, a man we'll discuss later. At this time, Ferdinand was a well-known automotive engineer, and he was the person who created the initial design for the Volkswagen Beetle.
Isn't everyone who's like made car production stuff back in those days like a horrible fucking person? Like aren't all of them super bad people? And usually they seem to have the same ideology.
Car that would go on to change the world. But the progress of this vehicle and the project wasn't linear, because although Hitler had this initiative and was pushing this messaging, and Ferdinand was developing this prototype vehicle, once 1939 came around, car production came to a halt, and tank production was the sole focus of almost every factory producing moving automotive products. But that's kind of where the good ends in this entire situation, because the more onion layers you peel back, the more dark it actually gets. Because for starters, although Hitler really wanted to have affordable vehicles, that goal was never met by Hitler. And Volkswagen's success isn't really attributed to Hitler, it's actually attributed to the British, who took over the project after World War II, because they essentially allowed Volkswagen to live on. After the war had ended, there was a bit of a debate whether or not Volkswagen was a consumer automobile company or a war production facility. And depending on what these factories were classified as would drastically change the outcome, because if this was a war production facility, then it could be dismantled by the British, and tools and machines could actually be taken as war reparations. After the war, it was up to the British to try to decide new management. And to put it briefly, the British didn't want Volkswagen. The British called Henry Ford to see if he wanted Volkswagen for free. He didn't want Volkswagen. And because nobody really wanted Volkswagen, a man named Heinrich Nordhoff, who was a German engineer, had the opportunity to rebuild the brand with the ambitious plan. And while there was a lot of post-war rules around German production, as far as Volkswagen is concerned, the rest is history. And the Volkswagen Beetle was a massive success. And Volkswagen is a car manufacturer, and the Volkswagen Group are massive entities to this day. And if you want a bit of a morbid laugh,
not my
go
brand.
to the Volkswagen wiki page. It takes
Mine
about
is
one
safe.
scroll to start seeing pictures of Hitler. But like I said, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, because when the initial Volkswagen project was happening, the Nazis didn't hire just anybody to build these concept cars. No, they used slave labor. And it's reported that the Nazis used over 15,000 slaves from different concentration camps to provide the manpower for the People's Car project. You know you're an evil person when even one of the...
You think they'll do that at the alligator camp concentration? I wouldn't be surprised. They've already got merch.
best things that people can attribute to you is still shrouded in just darkness and abuse. If nothing else, you'll likely be looking at Volkswagen just a little bit differently from now on. Ferdinand Porsche. I wanted to give Ferdinand his own section just to not overcrowd the first section, but I will keep this one a bit brief. Ferdinand Porsche was
that his own art, or
but he was very involved in the
did he
German war
commission
effort
that?
during World War II. Ferdinand was directly involved in the production of the advanced tanks that the Germans had during World War II, and on top of tanks, he also helped design and engineer their bomber planes as well. And because of all of the engineering efforts that Ferdinand had given, he was a member of the Nazi Party and an honorary Oberfuhrer.
Was anyone
in the
that was
SS, which is
into
basically just a military
cars
ranking
actually a
within
good
the Nazi
person
Party.
back
I would
then?
argue it's fair to say that those qualifications are worthy of putting you in the bad person category.
Yeah.
And for that reason, I wanted to mention him. Because although he helped develop the planes and tanks that killed millions of people, including civilians, he did develop the Volkswagen Beetle, but even more notably, nearly 35 years before he developed the Volkswagen Beetle, Ferdinand and a colleague developed the first gasoline-electric hybrid vehicle ever, known as the Loaner Porsche Electromobile. And while electric cars and hybrid cars didn't take off for another 100-something years, Ferdinand played an important role in pioneering the entire segment of automobiles. And in case you were wondering or didn't figure it out yet, Ferdinand Porsche is also the creator of Porsche automobiles, arguably one of the best automotive...
Say what? I would have never guessed. Wow. You learn something every day.
Manufacturers of all time. With that being said, as cool as the sports cars we have are today, it's definitely a mind bender thinking about the origins of these things. Saddam Hussein. Jumping out of World War II and Europe entirely, let's get into the Middle East and discuss an extremely polarizing figure, the president of Iraq from 1979 all the way up until 2003. A few credentials that qualify Saddam as a bad person were the genocides, human rights violations, and chemical weapons usage. But realistically, all you need to know is that Saddam Hussein had a dictatorial regime, and like every other dictatorial regime in history, they're not pleasant. While there was a lot of unsavory things going on in Iraq under Saddam Hussein's rule,
I'm not sure how true this is, because I was told it, but the person it was about is not the most truthful. But when I was a kid, a parent of mine was dating someone who was on in the army or whatever the fuck that was in Iraq, I believe. And one of their, I guess, person in their group, whatever, team, whatever, got his look-alike or whatever it was, killed him. But I don't think they actually got the real guy in that group. I think it was someone else.
One good thing that happened under his
been
rule
so
was
long.
free healthcare. That's right, if you were an Iraqi citizen during the 1980s, you had access to a plethora of healthcare services. Hospital visits, doctor's visits, medications. These were all provided to you from the government. And the reason why I mentioned the 1980s specifically is because that's when Iraq's oil revenue was rather high, which gave the government extra money to invest in public services, which it did, specifically with healthcare. But the benefit of this program was kind of short-lived because during the 1990s, the quality and access of all of these free services were basically paused due to severe international sanctions and, of course, the Gulf War that shortly after ensued. But regardless, for a period of time, Saddam Hussein did provide Iraq with free healthcare, but he also did provide genocide, murder, and human rights violations to others. Ted Bundy. If you couldn't already tell, I'm trying to make this video as much of a mixed bag as possible. But with that being said, I'm sure you're thinking, what possibly could Ted Bundy, likely one of the most famous serial killers and psychopaths ever, have done that's good? What is Ted Bundy's good deed to the world? And the answer is incredibly odd. Although Ted Bundy is one of the most famous serial killers of all time, there was also a time in his life when he was actively working to save people's lives. That's right, the psychopath who senselessly killed innocent women and girls else, was also somebody that people would talk to in their darkest hours. And what I mean by that is Ted Bundy worked at a crisis center in Seattle, where he specifically helped people dealing with suicidal thoughts. And on top of just helping these people, he wasn't even working there. He was a volunteer, a double good deed whammy. But in case this
aren't all of them volunteers, or is it just like majority?
To you, it's pretty shocking news to say the least. You know, a serial killer working at a suicide prevention hotline, sometimes the jokes just write themselves. But
was it before he was one, or was it during that time? Because it's very easily for it to just be appearance and good word about around, like, you know, his town, that, oh, he's such a good guy, which, you know, they seem to do.
the speculation behind why he was doing this is where the situation gets interesting, and something we really don't have an answer to. Bundy was never interrogated about his time as a crisis hotline volunteer. He had a lot of other things to answer for, so this is something that's kind of not fully known. But some popular speculations are that Bundy was just doing it as extra credit for school because he was a psychology major, another kind of ironic point, seeing that he's a psychopath. But it's also likely that Ted Bundy worked in this situation so that he could experience these emotions, learn from them, and ultimately try to emulate them and use them for his own twisted benefit. And a third theory is that Bundy worked at this center to feel a sense of power. It's said that psychopaths typically have a god complex, making them feel a grandiose sense of self, and that the world revolves around them, and that they are so powerful and so important. You know, and if you had this feeling about yourself, then it wouldn't be unreasonable to assume that you would likely put yourself in a position where people would come to you at their most vulnerable and essentially put their life in your hands. Even if they were potentially helping the other person, they were doing it for their own gain. So yeah, at one point in his life, one of the most notorious serial killers ever actually...
Maybe, I don't know, but do you think one of those three is more likely, or just that he was trying to look good?
prevented people from ending their lives. And I'm curious, what do you think Ted Bundy's motives were for working in this position? Did he want to look inconspicuous? Did he want to learn about human emotion? Did he want to feel like he was in control? Or was he just looking for extra credit in school? I have no idea, but they're all likely considerations. And while we're on the topic of notorious serial killers,
let's just get this one out of the way.
John Wayne Gacy. Gacy is another one of the most notorious serial killers from America. And he's also another example of somebody living a pretty disturbing double life. Because to most, he seemed like a local member of the community. He appeared to have a successful contracting business, he was active in politics locally, and he was also well-liked in the community for reasons we'll get into. But when nobody was looking and Gacy was alone with a victim, there was a twisted side that revealed itself. That specifically involved the torture, rape, and murder of at least 33 young boys and men, most of which he buried beneath his own home. But as I mentioned, every coin has two sides. And when Gacy wasn't ruining the lives of young boys and destroying families for generations to come, he would occasionally do things that would be considered actually good, most notably dressing up as Pogo the Clown and volunteering at children's hospitals and local events to bring cheer to children, which is obviously extremely eerie knowing what he actually brought to children. And on top of acting as a clown at others' events, he would also organize his own events,
for the same reason.
Neighborhood block parties.
To just look
food,
good.
Drink, entertainment, anything you would want any block party. And ironically, his events were typically attended by members of law enforcement, which once again only makes the reality of the situation that much darker. Similar to Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy was a killer hidden in plain sight, and truly a wolf in sheep's clothing. And while putting on events for your community and trying to bring joy to those in worse positions than yourself is definitely a noble pursuit, when you are doing so in order to find your next victim or to simply make yourself look less conspicuous, then you're almost not even a bad person doing good things. You're just a bad person pretending to do good things. It's so eerie to think that there are young boys and men that had...
I feel like that applies to everyone on the list. They just want to look good. There doesn't really need to be much behind it. It's either for themselves, for their own benefit, or just to publicly look better.
Completely opposite experiences with Pogo the Clown and Gacy. Some boys met Gacy and got a balloon animal, and some boys met Gacy and never saw their family again. And for that reason, it's hard to associate anything good with this person, much like every person on this list. Genghis Khan. Switching categories, continents, and time zones, we are now discussing likely one of the most famous people of all time. Genghis Khan was the ruler of the Mongol Empire, and possibly one of the most feared military leaders of all time. His violence and depravity knew no bounds, and the actions committed by and under Khan can really only be described as monstrous.
Like a bunch of
and in regards to Genghis Khan and all of the horrible atrocities he is associated with, one thing he is also reported to be is rather religiously tolerant, which was something that was extremely rare at the time. But this, to me, raises a question, because did Genghis Khan truly believe that diversity of faith was beneficial among the Mongol Empire? Or did Genghis Khan just know that when you have one of the largest empires to ever exist on this planet, spanning across multiple continents, it is unescapable to have a plethora of cultures and religions within your reign. And as a leader, you really only have two options. Do you convert everybody within your empire to a specific religion that you as the leader approve of and risk fragmenting your entire empire? Or do you tolerate religious differences as long as everybody's on the same page about the greater goals of the empire?
I feel like when you're more accepting of other religions, other people are less likely to absolutely hate your religion, because Christians are not very accepting of other people's religions, and therefore other people don't really vibe with that. So if you're more accepting, it would probably be easier to actually convert people.
As a whole. And well, I guess that's for you and the historians to decide. But it's definitely an interesting thought, and kind of ironic to think that one of the most
not really a good
warriors
thing. That's
of all
just
time wanted to make sure that people were practicing the faith that he
bare
felt was
minimum.
comfortable with. But something he may have not been comfortable with was massive drug cartels, which is something our next person definitely was comfortable with. Pablo Escobar. Pablo Escobar is one of the most notorious drug lords of all time, maybe even criminals of all time. He led the notoriously brutal Medellin cartel, and his net worth at the time of his death was estimated to be anywhere from $30 to $80 billion. He made his billions trafficking cocaine from Mexico into the U.S. from the 1980s to the 1990s. And he and his cartel reigned terror across Colombia and the rest of South America, and even in the United States with the trafficking of the narcotics he was selling. But despite the lifetime of organized crime, drug smuggling, torture, murder, and a lot of other unsavory things, Pablo did have a soft spot, specifically for the poor. In the 1980s, during the peak of his business success, Pablo funded a lot of housing and infrastructure projects for poor people, specifically in Medellin, keeping people off the street and giving them a place to live, which is quite noble considering the vast amount of wealth he acquired. Although the methods he used to acquire this money is more than illegal, immoral, and unethical, considering all the bloodshed it took to acquire and maintain that fortune. To some in Medellin, Pablo Escobar seemed like a Robin Hood-esque figure. He took money from those who were looking to buy his product, and he gave back to the underprivileged in his community. But I'll be honest,
isn't it just so they were on good terms, so that way they could smuggle stuff easier? Like, it could have been just to help people, but it was probably just to make the smuggling easier, or to get, more helpers. So, I don't know if it was just
if I was living in poverty on the side of the road and someone offered to give me a house, I really wouldn't care where the money came from, as long as the house was mine and I could live in it safely. And while we're on the topic of organized crime, let's talk about maybe one of the most famous gangsters of all time, Al Capone. Al Capone is one of the most notorious American gangsters, and he gained this notoriety during the Prohibition era because the government wanted to ban alcohol, and any legal sale was prohibited, meaning that there was a huge opportunity for illegal sale. Capone was the co-founder and boss of the Chicago mob from 1925 to 1931, but he spent most of his young life before that in organized crime as well. Capone's time in the
someone in my family used to clean for like some people in like the mob or mafia, like in the early 2000s or 2010s. So, fun fact.
mob involved political corruption, violence, illegal alcohol smuggling, bribery, and of course, murder and extortion. He was your quintessential mafia guy, but he, much like Pablo Escobar, had a soft spot for the underprivileged. And during the 1930s, when the Great Depression was going on, Al Capone used some of his wealth to actually fund soup kitchens for the unemployed. He opened a soup kitchen in Chicago and served thousands of meals for absolutely—
I feel like it's the same reason as Pablo did it, as just to make some stuff a little easier to do.
free. Similar to a few of the situations we discussed before, his motives are a bit unclear, because sure, he could have just out of the goodness of his heart wanted to do good for his community, but at the same time, opening up a soup kitchen in the same city that you have a huge public persona in is definitely good brownie points, and something that'll keep people off your radar and keep you in at least some people's good books. So his exact motivations for opening the soup kitchen aren't exactly clear.
I feel like you just
undeniable that he did open a soup
clearly
kitchen
said
to
his
feed
motivations
thousands during one of the hardest economic times in American history. And while we're still on the topic of organized crime, I have one more sub-point, because it's actually not one person, it's a group, the Yakuza. In case you're unfamiliar, the Yakuza are the mafias or cartels of Japan. At this point, I don't think I need to exactly go into excruciating detail on why organized crime groups aren't, great, specifically because of the crime associated with them consistently. But with that being said, in 2011, during a devastating earthquake and tsunami in Japan, one of the first groups of people to help support these people that were just affected by the natural disaster weren't first responders.
Really?
It was actually the Yakuza. And while this is speculated to have been more or less of a power and publicity move to show that, hey, we're here before the government, and they were more or less taking advantage of the situation than to make a positive impact, the Yakuza did in fact show up before any other disaster relief group did and provided pretty substantial disaster relief to those who were affected by the earthquake and the following tsunami. And really quickly, before we get to the last entry on this list, I just want to say, if you guys enjoyed this video and like this topic and would like to see maybe a part 2 or maybe see an opposite follow-up, great people that did horrible things, then I'd be more than happy to make that
What
video.
do you consider great people?
Honestly, it's just by showing some support. If you like this video and want to see more, leave a like or leave a comment letting me know that you want part 2 or a video about great people that did horrible things. But with that being said, let's discuss the last horrible person on this list. Osama bin Laden. Osama, much like the first guy in the list.
Okay, so I think it said Saddam Hussein for the story, but I think it was actually him that army stuff story was about. I'm not good with names. So, that story, I think it applies to him and not the other person. So, but my story was a little confusing because it's been years since I've heard about it. Also, I have an army jacket very similar to that he's wearing. Or like, I don't think it's the exact same, but it was definitely from the same war.
Probably doesn't need much of an introduction, but in case you need a refresher, Osama is probably most famously known for the September 11th attacks that happened in New York and his numerous global terror attacks that happened via Al-Qaeda, the group he was a leader of, the extremist terrorist organization. Osama is probably one of the most dangerous and notorious terrorists of all time, and the attacks that he helped orchestrate literally changed the world as we know it. But like everybody on this list, there are a few good things they have done. Specifically, in Osama's case, it is reported that he funded the construction of important infrastructure in countries like Sudan and Afghanistan, specifically roads, schools, and hospitals. But once again, it's highly speculated that these were more or less of a chess move rather than a selfless philanthropic move. Osama also had a copy of Super Mario Bros. On his computer, a video called Funny Cat 4, and there's even a video of him singing Lady Gaga's Poker Face. Crazy to think that this is the guy that, changed the world forever. And I guess the point of this video is just to highlight the sheer complexity of people and situations. And while obviously nobody on this list is redeemed by any means because of these few good deeds that they did, it is interesting to talk about the things that nobody talks about. And I don't think that it's wrong or dangerous or bad to state facts. Hopefully
I don't know. I feel like
you learned something new, satisfied your morbid curiosity, and maybe enjoyed a bit of a mind bender. Because it really is tough trying to associate, positive things with some of the world's most evil people ever. But it just goes to show, people are complicated, and you can stack up a lot of good deeds to ultimately create a horrible situation. Like, you could give all of your friends cookies, and you'd be a great person. You gave all your friends cookies. But if you gave all your friends poisoned cookies, and it killed them all, and your goal was to kill them, well, you kind of did a good thing, but it was ultimately to satisfy your evil plans. And I think that we kind of saw a lot of that on this list. If you enjoyed this video, check out the video on screen right now. It's a video about the most wanted criminals in the United States, and it's pretty crazy. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, trust me, bro.
I think someone forgot to put the end screen. But hope you enjoyed. What do you think about their motives? Do you think I'm right? Or do you have another explanation? If you made it this far, comment down below. Subscribe. Also, I hit 100 subscribers recently, so thank you. Oh, my thing. Thank you. It's been, at the time of recording this, almost 3 months of doing this. So that's nice. I hope you enjoy my videos for more than 3 more months. And until next time, bye bye.